When you do that, I'll get it. All right. Welcome everybody to Soft Bulk May. Heidi, what number is this?
This is 15.
Ooh.
15. What a beautiful
Episode
number.
15.
To have Nicole with us of Affirmation Billboards, Affirmation Project. Nicole, we have long been fans of you, and we're so glad that you're finally here with us tonight. While we're waiting on folks to roll in the chat, could you tell us where you're coming from and thinking about what Nicole's going to share and what Luke will share in conjunction with Nicole? What's one thing you think the world needs to hear more of these days? We're thinking of in terms of maybe affirmations or in terms of mantras, or what's one message that you feel like the world needs to hear more? So where you're from and one message for the world. While we're doing that, I would say the one thing I wish people around me knew more of or would hear more often is that I wish they're a little bit easier on themselves, a little bit softer on themselves. I feel like so many people have these incredibly high expectations for what they want to achieve with their work, with their art, with their impact on this planet. And that drive is a good thing, but not if it begins to eat away at your own source of strength. So I would say, I wish folks would be a little bit easier on themselves. Yeah, you're enough. Exactly. Heidi, what about you?
That's a nice, efficient way to say it. I was thinking back to some of the affirmation quilts from Luke and Nicole, and this one has just really stuck with me over time. The past versions of you were doing the best they could with what they knew. I think it's really easy for me to ruminate about past things and all the what ifs. And that sentence to me is so reassuring and kind and helpful in moving forward.
Well, because it's so, I mean, I agree with you there, Heidi. That one's also super resonant with me, just because like you can look back and feel like you did something wrong, but you only did because of the knowledge you have today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I would have been a much better fourth grader now. You know, I would have been much better, but like that doesn't mean I should feel bad about how I did in my report card in fourth grade, right? So I think that it's hard to recognize that when the timeline's shorter. Oh, last year, 2 years ago, I wish I would have, you know, whatever. But I'm fully with you on that one.
Yeah. And how about you guys? What are your answers?
Well, hold on a second, Nicole. If you who are devoting their life,
you guys, I meant Nicole and Luke.
I think today the one that I really feel connected with is just that you have been deserving of love and kindness and softness every day of your life, even when you felt like you were messing up. You deserved all those things. So that's what I would say.
Love that one.
encompasses so much, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We've got some good ones in the chat too, right? China's saying we need to be showing more love to one another. 100%. You have everything you need. That's a good thing to remember. Be curious of others. We're more alike than not. Support each other. I wish everyone knew that we were all in the same boat. And Mickey, going back to you, we are enough. You are enough. You have enough. You are enough. Yeah, let's just make Post-it notes or billboards and quilts out of all of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how about we go ahead and do our round of introductions for anybody that's here for the first time, and then we'll get started. I am Zach Foster. I make quilts out of repurposed materials. I am currently coming to you from the folk school in the western part of North Carolina, where I'm on artist residency. This will be the last time you see me coming from the folk school. Next month, I'll be somewhere else, and I'll be telling you about that some other night. That's not tonight. That's the big news. I'm just not ready to share it yet.
Oh
And,
boy, now we're all curious. Okay.
I know. Tonight, I'm going to be sharing with you the crazy quilt that I've been working on for the last several weeks. It is still a work in progress, like we all are. Let's remember that. But it's at a point where at least I can share it with you and tell you a couple stories. So I'm looking forward to that.
All right, and I am Heidi Parks. I am here from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I loved seeing my friend Donna is from Milwaukee, has joined us tonight also. It was a sad day for Milwaukee today with the Bucks basketball game losing to Boston, but It's a beautiful city. It's a great time of year. Lake Michigan is coming alive with the warm weather again, and that is a real inspiration for me of being in the Midwest and thinking about location. I do a lot of hand piecing, hand quilting, and also machine piecing on occasion. I teach classes on quilting. I exhibit my quilts. I'm in a show right now in Iowa that was curated by my friend Heather Kinnian, who lives in Chicago. And I think that's about it. Maybe one last tidbit is a lot of my work circles around diary and self-care or self-improvement, self-help. And that is a subject that I feel like a kindred spirit with Nicole about.
Oh.
Well, I'm Luke, also a quilt maker, recovering architect. My work is exclusively done by machine, just because I poked myself too much with the needle. But also just, that works for me, because I'm trying to make a lot of stuff to get my ideas from here out into the world. And so the fastest way I can do that, it seems to be a machine. Big thing that I'm working on, I just put up a show at Auburn University in Alabama, which is cool. It's a university I looked into going to, so it's kind of fun to have a full circle moment to go back there. They have a brilliant architecture program, so it's really fun to have a massive show at the university there, and I'm elated to be a part of it. And I'm also working on my garden. That's the big thing at home, is trying not to kill all of our plants.
That's a good thing. I'm Nicole Leth. I am Luke's wife, and I'm also just really excited to be here. I live in LA right now. I am a professionally trained textile artist and regular artist. I'm a writer, and my main full-time job is creating anonymous affirmations and statements of compassion and integrating them into our everyday lives in unexpected ways. So that's what I do every day.
I really look forward, Nicole, to learning more about your trajectory, like how you got to this place where you're doing these anonymous affirmations. What's your engine? What drives you for that? So thank you for being
excited to tell you.
All right. Well, unless there's some other ado, I guess I'll go ahead and jump in with me and my crazy quilt. Here we go, folks. All right. So the road to the crazy quilt has been a long one, and it would be impossible to trace it all the way back to its various sources of inspiration. But just lately, I would say that being here at the folk school and people have brought me a couple of crazy quilts have been very impactful. In the last couple of months, I've worked with Amanda Nadig, and I see her, she's out there in the audience. She led a foundation piecing workshop in the Nook, which crazy quilt is traditionally a foundation piecing technique. So that added a layer to the foundation. Heidi, you're going to see that you've added a layer to the foundation here, because I was so impressed with the couch quilt that you made, Bo, that had the horse, deer, pony.
Horses, they attack ponies.
There you go. I was so impressed with your line work there that I think that was sitting in the back of my mind with this. So I'm going to show you in a minute the current state of the project. It's about 80% done now, so it's a good time to share it. But you've seen some pictures. I've been sneaking and peeking, like that one, me sewing out in the woods. You may have seen my anonymous hands sewing, sitting outside. There's the quilt. There's my little hen basket. I found that basket at an antique store, and I learned later that it's called a hen basket, and it's woven that way because you can set a hen down inside of it, and it won't be so scared by all the movement around it. So if you need to take a hen to market, for example, you might use that basket. Also makes a great sewing basket for that reason. Here's the biggest sneak peek yet that was in my latest newsletter. This is actually here in this room of the quilt that has been assembled in tiles, and I was still kind of playing around with tiles. Unfortunately, that pink strip that you see there has not made its way into the final. As much as I love it, it turns out I didn't need it, but maybe it'll pop up. Anyway, without further ado, here's where the quilt stands today, where we're at. This whole time I was looking, I'd fallen in love with the idea of a crazy quilt. And I wanted to find a way that, how could I make a crazy quilt? Like, what would Zach's crazy quilt look like? And I knew it wouldn't be velvets or silks. Yeah, the idea of like, luxury fabrics just didn't appeal to me so much. The quilts that I were seeing here, they were out of most often cotton, sometimes linen, sometimes wool. The everyday fabrics were the one that were resonating most strongly with me. And originally I was gonna keep it fairly clean, pretty minimal embroidery, just going over the seams. But y'all, once I got started embroidering, I just couldn't stop. I mean, I caught the crazy, and so all the plan is that all the black parts will be a reflection, a different symbol or a different image from a memory of my last 5 months here in Brasstown during this residency. And I thought I would share with you a few of those now. So some of them are just kind of general. Anybody that's ever spent a minute at the folk school knows some of these references. I sing behind the plow has been our motto for 100 years almost. It's coming up in 2025. The idea that we can find joy in the daily work of life is just so pervasive here. And it is our logo and our symbol and our mantra, all those things combined. You can even see it when you drive on campus here. So I want to make sure that found its way onto the quilt. We still make things is something we say quite a lot. This idea that one of the definitions of craft is akin to the idea of crafty. If you think of a crafty fox, right, as one that's sly, one that has knowledge, one that has a certain power to get things done. And so I like the idea that by making things with our own hands, we have a certain power that we're learning how to wield. The founder of the folk school, even though it's called John C. Campbell, the founder was Olive Campbell, who named it after her husband, who had died a couple years before this place could open. It was their dream to start this school together. Her name was Olive Dame Campbell, and so we have this song that we sing around the fire sometimes that starts off with Olive Campbell was a dame. Yes, she was. I'm really excited about how this particular portrait turned out, because I've tried some embroidered portraits in the past that didn't turn out so, I didn't hew too closely to the original. You couldn't recognize them, but this one you can. I feel pretty good about it. And a lot of that is thanks to Sorrel Carrison. I don't believe Sorrel's in the crowd tonight. In fact, she's in the UK, so I'm gonna bet she's asleep. But Sorrel gave me some good pointers on how to recreate a line drawing into embroidered portraiture, and we're going to have a workshop coming up about that in the Nook on the 26th. So if you're interested in that, keep your eyes out for more information. But the fact that this looks as good as it does is in large part thanks to Sorrel. Here's a closer up version of Ms. Olive Campbell. And anybody who's heard me talk about Olive's porch, Olive is a reference to Olive finally getting her own place here in the town. Then there's memories that are just like, just warm memories. This one, there's a little old lady in her mid 80s that lives right beside the cottage I'm staying in. And we'll often just kind of chat over the fence that separates the cottage I'm in and her house. And one day I came out to carve a little spoon in the morning, cup of coffee in one hand and the half carved wooden spoon in the other. And I see on the fence post a dry erase board that she's tied up, and it just says, Zach, come over. And she was in the middle of cleaning out her craft room, and she wanted to see if I wanted any supplies. So Patricia, this one's for you. I love that moment. We spent a really beautiful couple hours in her house looking at some of the things that she had. At Olive's porch, which is more than a century old, this building, there's wooden floors, and there is the burn mark of an iron, unmistakably an iron, right in the middle of one of the rooms. And so this, I didn't intentionally make this piece of black iron shaped, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. So this is for the iron shaped burn mark on the floor of Olive's porch. You've seen a lot of the videos of the lunchtime jams, people playing old time music. You probably remember pictures of the first quilt bomb that I did. So there's a reference to that. I love going to Foxfire. So this, I did most of these freehand, and I gotta say, hey, that's pretty good. I did not do a Campbell portrait freehand, but I did do the Foxfire logo, and that's pretty cute. I love seeing interpretations of logos and brand names and just iconic images in general. So not only am I tying in personal memories, but one of the things that really, I don't want to say weighs on my mind, but it's just ever present while I'm here, is you literally can't drive down the street and not run into remnants of Cherokee heritage here in this county called Cherokee County. And to the extent that one of the intersecting roads, and I'm looking right at it past the window, is called Setawig. That's how we've started. We've been writing it for the last couple hundred years. But the district court judge, who was Cherokee himself, would actually sign documents with the word that you see, setowike. And so I'm interested in also finding ways with this quilt to not correct the historical record, because that would be a very lofty ambition for one low quilt, but at least to address it, right? And to have a little space for it, have a place for it. And so that, as you can see, is a quick tour. I couldn't show you all the little bits and bobbins. I'll do that maybe when I get it all done. But you can tell that most of the black pieces have been embroidered. I've got about 5 or 6 left to do. I'm trying to pace myself because hand health is important, as Heidi knows. I've been doing a lot of good hand yoga and trying to keep things. Heidi, I need to talk to you about this knuckle right here, but that's for another time. I will say that it's fun. The back is just monstrous, right? Because it's foundation piece. And so it's very easy to see all the seams and all the just the messiness still present on the back. It will get covered up with a big, nice piece of muslin for the backing eventually, but it's fun to see it for the time being. So y'all, that's me and my crazy quilt. Stay tuned to see how it's gonna come together in the end. And as I'll be sewing tonight, I'll be working on this little deer here, who is my aspirational animal while I'm here. The deer were the first people to greet me when I pulled up at the folk school, so I took it as something special. And that's all I got.
Zach, that's beautiful to get to see. Also impressive secret keeping.
Yeah. Well, I've had a really good time researching crazy quilts. As y'all have seen on Instagram, I've been posting some of my favorites. And also that's allowed me some time to work behind the scenes. You know, I'm like, let me post crazy quilts I love so I can get some work done.
All right, so let me share my screen. I met you guys last in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was at the beginning of teaching a retreat on travel diary quilts. And at that time, this piece of fabric was totally blank. And I felt like it was an exciting show of force and lots of sewing to be able to share with you what's happened in a month's time. This is the quilt top as it is right now. And I wanted to share a little window into what I mean by a travel diary quilt. There are several different words or topics that I'll use from time to time. Travel diary or story quilt or diary quilt. There are subtle differences between them, but they're also pretty interchangeable. The travel diary is usually specifically connected to a specific trip or time away from home. So that would distinguish it. But, you know, it's still telling a story from my point of view, like a diary, like a story. And I think should be kind of fun to dig into. So the very first thing that I decided to do on this quilt was add this long skinny strip. And that was pretty intuitive because when I was flying to Santa Fe, I made this tiny little quilt for the Making Zen event that I was in. And I had a little extra backing fabric after I did my wraparound binding. And I thought, well, got to use up this scrap from the sewing I did on the airplane on my way here. And then from there, there was I was on vacation before class started. So it was maybe an extra 6 days or so between soft bulk ending and me actually starting to sew. But it was that kind of a once in 50 years dust storm in Santa Fe. It felt real fun to applique and then later embroider things that might possibly represent the dust storm, and was also a convenient way to demonstrate different techniques for my students, like a curve and a corner and a skinny strip in class. One of my favorite hikes that I went on was a place called Sankaway, where I guess it's mainly from modern-ish people, but I remember in the early 90s when I was out there before it being the same phenomenon, that the trail is sort of carved in from people's footsteps over time. So you'll be hiking and the ground on either side of you is up to your knee or your hip or at least your ankle. And I embroidered that path. And just like Zach was talking about, I really take a lot of joy in eyeballing it rather than tracing it accurately. So that's one that I just eyeballed in. Here on the bottom of the quilt is an old orange tank top of mine that I used to wear. I took the strappy top part off, so it's really just my tummy. But that was left from me taking it apart previously, and it was fun to applique this big swath shape of it, of that tank top early on. And I embroidered this first and then thought about me and my friend Zach Foster second, because the animal that I am most connected to is the rabbit, and the animal that Zach is most connected to is the deer. And in Santa Fe, the jackalope is a very important mythological animal, much like a unicorn. And I only after I spent hours embroidering it did I realize, like, oh, that's me and Zach's animals together.
I love that. That's beautiful.
That's sweet. So you're gray thread and I'm blue.
You're so good. My back stitches are never that straight and even.
Oh, I got a special little trick I use for that. You could kind of see the outline of some paper on the back there. So anyways, that's how I did it. I became a hat person while I was there because I got all windburned and sunburned when it was cool outside, and realized, of course, that the sun is still real hot in that kind of altitude, even if it's only 50 degrees out. So I ended up doing some pleating and then embroidering for this hat. I also got some nice little scraps of, I have never had a group of students in all my years of teaching bond the way that these students in my Madeline Island class in Santa Fe bonded. Everyone was hugging at the end and saying, I love you to each other. It was a beautiful thing. And so some of the little bits of fabric in here are from students and different people in class. So this is a handkerchief that was given to me by Sam. This is another really accurate drawing of a photo of a piece of juniper tree that I saw on the ground and put in my pocket because it had already fallen. And it felt kind of nice to only really accurately depict half of it and then leave the rest of it to a silhouette or to the imagination. I like sharing with people about balancing effort and ease and precision and just going for it. And something about that balance felt really nice to me. This is inspired by Georgia O'Keeffe. Some nice foundation piecing, just like you were mentioning before, that Amanda does. I did some knotting. This is a technique that I learned from my friend Adriana Torres of making a knot. It's kind of like the coral stitch, but also different from the coral stitch to make a three-dimensional raised thing. And those to me are, it's always fun if I can get a twofer. So for me, those are very much like the dried out cactus skeletons that you get to see in Santa Fe. But also I placed them intermittently on the quilt, with me kind of trying to dig into a new health problem that I'm trying to tackle now that my hormones are in balance a little bit better. Since 2019, I've had floaters in my eyes and I see these little spots and they are beyond frustrating. If anyone has a tip for what to do about floaters, please tell me. I'm on the prowl, going to see the eye doctor again on Thursday. But I thought like having those dispersed that way kind of are like the way that the world looks to me these days. Here's another little three-dimensional floater. Some lace. I also, you can see this big gold piece. I put that on early on and it just felt like walking on the trail. it's so straightforward when you're on one of those loop trails. You just know what you're supposed to do. It might be feeling really hard at a certain, I'm not like the strongest hiker in the world, but you know what's coming next. And there's this really interesting feeling of being on a path. I learned a lot more about the late in life friend of Georgia O'Keeffe, Juan, forget his last name now, but he made an all black sculpture that I really liked. That was a unique silhouette and shape at one of the museums in Santa Fe. And for that piece, I eyeballed the outline, the silhouette of this sculpture from him. And then I kind of felt a little guilty packing the polka dots. Like I didn't have a good reason why I was bringing them with me in my tiny little tote bag of 5 pounds of fabric or less. And it turns out Georgia O'Keeffe wore a lot of navy blue and white polka dot clothing. And that just felt so satisfying and interesting to take note of. Here you can also see some milagros that I bought, as well as we were looking at Chris Roberts Antiou, fabulous quilter who has a gallery in both Santa Fe and New Orleans. And she had a piece that was looking at a rabbit constellation. And so because of her, I put this rabbit constellation, embroidered that pretty accurately on the quilt. And my milagros up close, my little rabbit. This is a viewfinder from the museum, encouraging you to look through a little hole to see things. This is a fabric that was dyed by Bev, and she introduced us to Gassily. I forget his last name now. Zach, have you met him yet? He's supposed to be at the...
Not yet.
Not
But
yet.
apparently there was he's from Nigeria.
Yeah.
Nigerian
And lives in
indigo
Santa Fe.
dyer
Yeah.
that came from Santa Fe to the folk school. So we got to make that happen.
Oh, you guys have got to meet. Yeah, we were in his backyard in his studio rolling out all this indigo, and I had gone to Albuquerque and I got to see his work on the museum wall, and then to be in his backyard in the studio and get to buy some of his fabric was just surreal. And so Bev had dyed that in his class, and it was just this love fest of everybody trading fabric, and it was so beautiful. This is from Linda. This is something she dyed, and it's representing a tumbleweed from the dust storm. So we all have tumbleweeds on our quilts. This is when they wanted me to demonstrate trapunto. This is a windmill because I have this nice memory of going for walks with my grandma and her 2 dogs, Sopa and Pia. And we'd go to the old broken down windmill, and it had this big water reservoir. So I liked that suddenly this blue piece could be the water that the windmill was pumping for the cattle back in the day. And there it is all done. I probably went over. I'm sorry about that. But it's a wonderful way of cataloging memories and stories. And there's like more details in here that I don't even have to. Oh yeah, like my hand, I did this wonderful weaving of my hand in the middle. And that is because there's so much weaving everywhere in Santa Fe, and it's just gorgeous to get to look at and to get to see the petroglyphs and marks made by humans from so many centuries ago. But that is my story of my travel quilt. And Zach and I, like the Jackalope, are going to be teaching together in Madeline Island in June. In less than a month we'll be there. So Zach, you're on mute.
My plan is when I leave the folk school to drive out to Nashville. I'm doing a photo shoot with Quilts there, blah, blah. But then from Nashville to Chicago is only 7 hours. So I'm going to see Amanda. Hi, Amanda. And I'm going to drive up to see you, Heidi. That's the plan. And then you and I will drive up to Milwaukee from there.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to listen to a good audiobook or chit chat and take turns sewing and driving.
Well, one thing that I'm looking forward to, because I came into this residency with, proposed project and a series of 3 quilts, the homecoming quilts. I've talked about it before, but to me, this is a quilt that is a better summation of a better representation of my time in this place. And so I think if anybody asked me from here on out, I'll be like, this is the quilt that I want to be remembered for here at the folk school. You know, I can look at this and just remember so many people, places, times, stories, smells, sounds. And it's like a photo album, but better because I spent time reflecting on each and every image that I've picked and then figured out how to represent into this piece.
And I find when I'm sewing and somewhere, it creates a really strong memory for me of what I was up to when I was sewing it. So there are things on here that, like, we went to see the folk art museum and I had time to do a little tiny weaving while I was sitting with Sam waiting to get picked up to get driven back to downtown. And you know, that sticks in my brain. And then I got home and I went down a Johnny Depp trial rabbit hole. And I know what I was embroidering and weaving while I was watching that. And it's just a remarkable way of tracking time and remembering where you were, because you make that memory as you're stitching.
And especially like what you're doing with your situation with your quilt, and you're sharing it with other people. You're telling stories, you're including their stories in your story. It's beautiful. So folks, if you're not doing anything, what is it, the third week of June? I don't know.
Around
I'll be there.
Yeah. Come join us. It is a
fun.
beautiful part of it. I am so excited for Zach to finally come out to Wisconsin. I've slept on your couch so many times that I'm real excited to have you come to me.
Yeah. Long overdue.
Yeah. Yeah. And hi, Linda. I'm glad you're saying hi. Linda with the tumbleweed is here.
Oh, Linda Barr? Linda Barr, that's your tumbleweed.
Yeah, that's her tumbleweed.
I love knowing that. Oh.
Yeah. All right. Over to Nicole and Luke.
Awesome. So Luke and I are combining today, and I am going to start by telling you about what I do, and then he's going to jump in and talk about what we do together. So we'll just share the screen. Okay. So today I'm going to tell you about my art practice and this project that I have been working on full-time for the last 3 years, in which I integrate anonymous affirmations or statements of compassion into the world in anonymous and unexpected and free ways. But before I tell you a little bit more about that, I need to tell you a story first, and that's my story. And it starts right here. The picture on the left is a picture of me when I was a little kid. I was joyful, curious, happy little kid. I was born in Iowa, so I have also been like a good Midwestern girl most of my adult life. And I was an only child growing up, which means I don't think I really had a choice if I wanted to be creative and artistic, because so many only children can empathize with just needing to be creative to figure out how to spend all the time. This picture on the right is a picture of my best friend. He was my dad. Growing up, I thought he was like the coolest, most brilliant, most creative, most invincible person. And he taught me so many amazing lessons, things I'm still like thinking about and referencing now that I'm 29. And we had such a special bond because he was the only other person on this planet that I felt like was designed the way I was designed. Our brains were the same, our hearts were the same, and it felt like we just like saw the world in the same way. And it's been kind of hard to like find other people who understand you on that level. So it was always really special. Unfortunately, when I was 17, I woke up on a Saturday morning. It was October 2nd, 2010. And my mom told me that in the middle of the night, my dad had committed suicide. And at that moment, I felt my entire world just break apart and my entire childhood just kind of get ripped away. Growing up, my dad had struggles with addiction to alcohol and drugs, and he had also had struggles with mental illness. A lot of it stemmed from unresolved child abuse. And to be honest, like my family did not hide this from me. I was like super present in every single step of his journey. I went to AA meetings with him every single week from the 4th grade on. I was at every rehab, every hospital. I was there for the good moments to celebrate like the little victories. And I was also there for some of the rock bottoms. So from a very young age, I was like just taking in all of this raw human experience. And to be completely honest, I never thought he was a bad person, and I never thought there was anything wrong with him, and I never thought that he was bad or weak or any of it. I just thought he was a human being, and I always just perceived him as a real human being going through real human things, and I had so much compassion for the entire time. So on the day that we learned that he had passed away, I felt absolutely heartbroken because I understood the context of the entire trajectory of his experience, and it was heartbreaking for me. And I remember going into my room that day and just laying down face down on my bed and just like screaming and crying into my pillow and like kicking my feet into the mattress. And this like river of rage and sadness was just like pouring out of me. And then all of a sudden, this moment of calm came over me. And I had never really experienced something like this. And this thought, like this idea, these words popped into my head. And they said that maybe I had to fight to create something beautiful out of this pain, and that maybe that would be the only chance I have at like healing and surviving from this trauma. And I was 17, and this felt like a huge, like profound idea, but something inside of my gut knew that like I had to live this now. Like that was going to be what I did. And like I said, I was an only child. I was very creative and artistic, but after I lost my dad, art became my entire life. And it was the only thing that made sense. I began this art practice in which I had this journal, and every single day I would sit down and I would write down every single thing that I wish somebody else would say to me. I would write down everything that I desperately wanted somebody to say, that I desperately needed to hear. And these statements looked a lot like affirmations, and they looked a lot like statements of compassion, just things reminding me that I was doing good, that I was going to get through this, that I was good enough, that I was important, that I was lovable. All of these things I was just writing down. And now it's really apparent to me that I was soothing myself through this writing practice. And it started to make me feel better. And then I started doing this thing where I would write in my journal and then paint the things that I was writing up on the walls of my bedroom. And I started to feel even better. And I realized there was something about this practice of being really intimate and writing and self-soothing for myself, and then putting these intimate words in a bigger and slightly more public and tangible place. And then they could be integrated into my daily experience. And that made me feel better. And then I had a revelation that if this helped me feel better, maybe if I put these words out into the world, maybe other people would see them and read them, and maybe they would mean something to those people. And maybe those people were people experiencing things like my dad had felt. Maybe they were going through things like that, or maybe they were just regular humans going through a regular human day, and that my words out there would just make whatever moment a little bit better. So for the rest of my time in high school, living in Iowa, every single weekend, I went out into the world with my journal and this like big bag full of spray paint. And I found abandoned buildings and warehouses, and I would just graffiti statements of compassion and affirmation out in Iowa. And that is how I spent my time for the rest of high school. Looking back now, it's very obvious to me, this is where the project that I do now got its start. But when I look and reflect on this time in my life, I think of a 17-year-old, 18-year-old girl who was practicing creating beauty from pain, and was practicing creative resilience, and who was practicing alchemizing the hard things in her life. So I went on to graduate high school. I moved out of my sleepy Iowa town. I decided to go to art school, moved to Kansas City, went to the Kansas City Art Institute. I got my BFA in textile design. So I'm officially a professional textile artist. And over my time there, I was just, throwing myself into all these different explorations of techniques and art. And I was trying a lot of things, but I kept coming back to that idea of integrating compassion into accessible and everyday places. So for a while, that looked like making affirmation clothing tags and putting them onto clothing that I was sewing. It looked like creating signage and placing it places. For a long time, I was spending a lot of time writing and then printing that on stickers and leaving those stickers all over the place. But the one thing that remained true is that I always had my writing practice first. And I was always just writing things that I desperately needed to hear, and then designing objects and printing them and putting them forth into the world. So my time in art school looked like a lot of different things. And like any budding artist, I had a lot of different jobs. I tried a lot of different things. But like I said, I kept coming back to this idea of integrating compassion into the world. And it felt like every time I practiced that intention, I started to work towards something bigger. And then in 2019, it was July, finally, I had this idea that I wanted to do the biggest affirmation yet. And I realized that I wanted to rent a billboard and write an affirmation and put it there. I had no idea what I was doing. I literally Googled, how do you rent a billboard? And I learned how to do it there. I was working full-time as a yoga teacher then. So I started saving my paychecks a little by little. And finally I saved up enough to rent the cheapest billboard in Kansas City. I wrote this affirmation that you see. And at this time in my life, these were the words that I desperately needed to hear. And these are the words that my heart desperately wanted to share with other human beings out into the world. I did not tell anybody I was putting this billboard up. My name is nowhere on it. It is completely anonymous. It was not about getting Instagram followers. It was not about secretly selling something. It was just about being kind for kindness' sake. And when it finally went up, I got into my car and I drove by it and I cried. And then I brought Luke into the car and we drove by it together and had a similar experience. And that was enough for me. I didn't have any other plans. That was it. And then a week and a half after it was up, I showed a friend some photos, and then they showed a friend, and then they showed a friend, and then they showed a friend. And I woke up one morning, to see that my billboard had gone viral on the internet, and all of a sudden millions of people had seen it and were talking about it and wanted to know more. And I had all these emails from major newspapers who wanted me to talk about it. And I had the opportunity then to share why I did what I did. And I had the opportunity to tell everybody the story and the intention and why and what I hope to accomplish with this project. And after that, everything kind of started happening really fast. Advertisers from around the country donated me free billboard space. So I had the opportunity to take my little notebook, write more affirmations, and bring them to places that I had never even been before. These are billboards that float around New York City and Manhattan. I went to visit them, and they still float around New York City and Manhattan to this day, cycling through the billboard whenever they have a chance to put them up. I started working with mental health advocates from small towns around the country. I designed them custom affirmations for their needs, and then they funded billboards being put up in their own communities. And then in September of 2019, I put up 400 billboards around the country for Suicide Prevention Month. And again, I took my notebook and I wrote down all these different affirmations, all these different words, and then I designed all these different billboard files, and they went up on billboards all around the country. And Luke and I took the entire month off and drove to see as many of them as we could, which ended up to not be that many because it's hard to drive around the entire country. This iteration of the project went on to win an Obie Award, which is a lifetime achievement award, similar to winning an Oscar, but in the advertising world. So that was really cool to see the project recognized in that way. And so for the last 3 years, I have been putting up billboards all around the country. And every time I put up a new billboard, I try to go to wherever it is so I can stand in front of it and be present and actually try to understand what it symbolizes. Because to me, these are more than just billboards. This is a constant reminder that maybe the hardest days of our lives have the most purpose. And maybe the most we can ever do is fight like hell to create beauty out of the most painful moments of our lives. And maybe that's enough. There have been over 600 billboards that I have created in the last 3 years. They have been seen by 60 million people and counting. And even though I paid for the first billboard with my paycheck from my yoga job, now this project is completely self-sustaining. It's funded entirely by a network of donors that I have and corporate sponsors who give me resources to keep this going. It has just been so amazing to see these billboards everywhere. And it's been amazing to engage with environments and to constantly touch base with myself and my writing practice and everything that keeps this project going in the way that it does. So after I did a few hundred billboards, I wanted to challenge myself to try to do affirmations in spaces that weren't necessarily billboards. So I started exploring putting affirmations on the windows of abandoned storefronts. I started putting affirmation posters around big cities. Returned to putting affirmations on boats. This one goes on beaches in Florida. I even rented a billboard truck and designed and wrote affirmations, and it drove around a city for an entire day. I rented an airplane and I flew an affirmation around the skies for a while, and that was really amazing. The most recent installment is this past February. I rented a section of highway in the desert in California, and I designed 3 billboards to be experienced consecutively, and I wanted to have a conversation with people as they drove. This project was up for a little over a month and impacted 5 million people. After I did my first billboard, I wanted to challenge myself and try to create a smaller and more intimate way that I could engage with people in a way that was still equally powerful. So I started an affirmation postcard mailing service. Every single month, I sit down with my notebook, I write out the things I need to hear, I create affirmations, and then I design a postcard and get it printed. They always say something different. They're always anonymous. I still do not put my name on anything that I put into the world. And that is one of my biggest values with this project. The first month that I created this project, 250 people signed up and I sent out 250 postcards. And now I send out 6,000 postcards a month, and I've sent out 60,000 postcards since 2020. And that is something that I don't really have words yet to explain to you how much it means, but it means a lot. And now is the portion that Luke is going to jump in and talk about our collaboration with Affirmation Quilts. Luke.
I don't know what to say. That's, other than just to sort of say, as a quilter, I offered another platform for her to express some of these affirmations she's been working on. And kind of change some of the intimacy with the messaging through the medium of quilting. And so we created these quilts and put them up for free in different places. They are our gift to the world, and they have gone up in cities and nature and desert and mountains and all of these different places. And the only text outside of the message on them is, these are for free. You can take them. They're a gift. And so it just created a place for Nicole's messages to live on in infinity in a way that actually gets to be this very beautiful kind of private domestic, but also when they're up and hung, they hold space in kind of the large scale public, kind of as a billboard does. So they're these really wonderful objects that allow the text to be kind of presented large, but also then for someone to take it and own it, and it becomes a part of their life and experience.
It seemed really important to me because to me, quilts represent a comfort object that inherently gives love, and affirmations inherently represent a comfort statement that gives love. And so I really, really enjoyed getting to work and merge our 2 worlds in this way. Yeah.
Oh, I'm just pressing buttons, man.
I know.
What a cutie. That's one from right off the strip in Las Vegas. That was the first one we put up.
No, the Utah one was the first one.
Oh,
we put up.
yeah.
This was the second one we put up.
And sometimes we've seen people gather them, and sometimes they've been there for days before they're gone forever. I mean, there's no determinant for how long they'll stay up. Sometimes it is again days, and sometimes it is 5 minutes.
It's been really
Nicole, have you ever had to leave a quilt behind unclaimed at that point? Or have you
Oh,
always
yeah.
hung around long enough to see it get claimed?
Most of them we've left unclaimed, but we've had people say they've gone to the space to look for it.
Yeah.
And so therefore have told, because I mean, the point is not necessarily to witness the gift. It's about sort of, it's almost better in a sense, like the giving sense to leave it for kind of the world, right? Because if we don't know where it goes, it gets to be to everyone, right? It's sort of Schrodinger's cat in a infinite degree, right? We don't know who gets the quilt because we didn't see it.
I think we've only seen one get taken, and it was actually this one that we put up in San Francisco. It was probably 2 minutes after we hung it up. We were like literally standing here taking photos, and a couple came up and looked at it and then cut it down and gingerly folded it up and tucked it under their arm and then like walked off into the sunset hand in hand. And it was like the most amazing thing to see someone do with your art. But yeah, the majority of them, well, all of them except for that one, we just leave them there. And it's odd to just be so disconnected from this object that you spent tens of hours making, but it's also like so freeing, and I love it. That's it. I just included a little info here. The only important thing is that if you want to sign up to receive anonymous affirmation postcards, my website is listed here. I also think it's going out in an email, but that's all I have for you guys today.
Nicole, I just feel like dancing. I'm just so excited. I love all of that. Thank you for sharing your energy and your vision. And I love seeing how the two of you have very naturally brought both of those together in these affirmation quilts.
Well, thank you for listening.
I've got a lot of questions, but I'm gonna just I'll confine it to one, and then I'll let other people talk. But that is, so these are anonymous projects, but I'm wondering if there's ever been a time when word has gotten back to you somehow about where either the quilt or a billboard or the plain banner or postcards or anything. Has word ever come back to you about how people have interacted with these affirmations?
There's been a few times when I do billboards, sometimes people reach out to the company who owns the billboard and then try to get a hold of me that way. So then like the billboard company will then reach out to me and send me the message from the people. And so that was always very nice that people go like do that much work to try to talk and tell me how much it meant. Like that means a lot. And then there are people who receive the postcards who know that it's me or find out that it's me. And I do get like emails or comments and stuff that like it means something to them in that way. But I would say it's like 5% of the time I hear anything back, and 95% of the time, nothing.
Yeah, Nicole, I loved getting to hear the story from you. I think maybe 2 months ago, Luke tagged you in a post and I was able to, like see your actual Instagram account, which surprised me that I wasn't already connected to it. But that led me to your website and reading the story about you and your dad. And it's just an incredibly moving story to share on your website in that way. And it was wonderful to get to hear it and to get to see his face. I feel kind of kindred spirit in a lot of ways because my dad also went to a lot of AA meetings. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of him is the way that he changed over time. Like the dad that I had when I was in elementary school is not the same dad from high school, and is certainly not the same dad from the last 5 years of his life that I just so enjoyed spending time with and loving and living with and making furniture. And he passed away in 2018 from from complications from having been a 17-year cancer survivor, but he got that cancer from having been an alcoholic. And it's such a beautiful reminder, I think, for me, that I try to hold onto with my dad, is the way that people can change over time. Like, you don't have to stay the same. And so that statement that you share, that's so beautiful to me, is that even if you messed up in the past, you can go on and be really different, and know that there were lots of reasons for why that was happening. And you just so beautifully shared how you can hold those two things at the same time. You can be human and not perfect, and also so deserving of love and lovable. And you're just wonderful at articulating that. And I really appreciated it.
Thank you so much. That was so kind. I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, it's an important part of the heart of the work, I think. And yeah, just so beautiful to have you share. There were so many wonderful comments in the chat as well. People sharing that they love your energy. That there was one that was so good, like that tonight. What a balm tonight's soft bulk is, from China M.
Oh,
Good word, balm.
you.
Nicole, I would encourage you to, and we can hook you up with the comments after this, go through and read what people have been writing. It's very sweet. Which leads me to another question. And folks out in the audience, if y'all have questions, please, chime in the chat. But Nicole, have you ever received some anonymous affirmation motivating things that stand out to you? I mean, I'm sure it happens from time to time, but anything, have strangers, people you don't know, turn the mirror back to you in a way?
Oh, that's such a good question. Nothing comes to mind. I don't think that I have received anything like that. I definitely, receive like letters and like really kind things in the mail from friends and loved ones, and sometimes strangers, and like that always means something to me, but I've not received anything anonymous. Yeah.
Well, you may start. Somebody this week asked me, he's like, can I mail Nicole something anonymously? And I was like, well, I don't know if I'm give out her address, but I'll touch base with her and see.
Oh, that would make me so happy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Somebody wanted to return the favor, the kindness. One other question, and I'll try to stop having questions. I just can't help it. Is Nicole, who motivates you, right? Like, you're in the business of motivating others and affirming others. But apart from your beautiful partner, we take that for granted. Who motivates you? Like, who do you read? Who do you listen to? Who do you think about? Whose artwork keeps you buoyant and keeps your spirit fed and nurtured?
That's a really good question. I read a lot of like self-help books. I've always been like a super big fan of Brene Brown's work, just on, compassion and stuff. But my kind of odd answer is I get a lot of all of that stuff by like rereading my old journals and really doing serious reflection on the past versions of me. And so I feel like my biggest teacher and my biggest inspiration is like seriously reflecting on the past people that I've been in my life. And that's constantly where I get a lot of things that encourage me and inspire me to keep going.
Wow, Nicole, I love that. That's something I think about too, is like, oh, thanks past Heidi for doing that, or this one's for future Heidi. One of the books that got me especially into that was Marcel Proust's Remembrance of Things Past. It's a long book.
Okay.
But the object of his affection in the book, Albertine, he like loves every version of Albertine from every day that she's like gets to wake up in the morning. Who is Albertine today? And it's like just kind of magical that you might enjoy. But that's so interesting. What a wonderful question, Zach, about being inspired by past versions of yourself.
Well, I think, when we think of caregivers, and Nicole, I'm going to lump you in that category just for the sake of this
Oh,
this part of your work. You are a caregiver in a sense. You also got to take care of yourself. You know, you're busy taking care of other people, but you got to make sure your own cup is full. And so I think about that with my mom, who's taking care of her 106-year-old mother. And I think about that with my dad, who's taking care of his mother. Like, they got to take care of themselves as well. So, yeah, just wondered. Y'all might be interested too. A friend of mine is working on a collection of poetry because he recently found a stash of poems that he wrote in high school. So to say this out loud, it's going to sound a certain way. And if you're out there, friend, you know, I got a lot of love for you. But found a bunch of poems that he wrote in high school, which we don't, you know, assume to be a writer's best work, and has written a response to each of those poems now 20, 30 years later, right? Like, what has he learned? How is he now in a different place in his life? And reading them side by side was revelatory. So just food for thought, whatever that means for y'all or for folks out in the audience.
I want to read that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, sounds really neat.
Now I see, Heidi, we're going to go to questions in the chat.
Yeah, well, Nicole, I've got kind of a different kind of question about sustainability. Because Zach's question was more about emotional sustainability. And it's incredible that you've set this up to be self-sustaining with companies helping. But how does that, help you pay your bills? Because are you still teaching yoga? Is there a way that you have found to, both get support for you and all of your time and energy and creativity, as well as the financial support to make the billboards happen?
It's a really good question. It's actually something I'm working more on now that I'm living in LA. For a long time, I was doing a lot of things on the side that helped me pay the bills. But I would say the way that I'm able to make it sustainable for my profitability is I do a lot of speaking, a lot of lectures. I do a lot of commissions and stuff, and that helps. But, I'm working on it, and also have to jump in and help Luke a lot and do other just like artsy, one-offs. So my goal is to continue growing the ways in which I can, sustain myself. And my biggest challenge, and the thing I keep having to create boundaries around, is I, never want to charge money for people to consume my work. I always believe that affirmations should be free and accessible for all. But I also, as the maker, need to make money so I can continue doing this as a job. So I'm trying to figure out what portions of this I can, make money off of, and what portions remain free. So it is like a constant conversation that Luke and I are having, and working on it is the honest answer.
That's amazing. I mean, you've only been at it, you said, for 3 years, right? In 3 years, you've had all of these things happen. And I think it's tricky for any artist to come to a place of sustainability, both to afford to make the work and then to also have the work be, and just such an interesting question too of how to do that. That's really so smart that you're doing lectures and it almost reminds me of if Christo and Jean-Claude are perhaps an inspiration of yours.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What a great parallel, actually. That's, I think, brilliant. I hadn't put those two together as just their work practice. And if anybody doesn't know, Christo and Jean-Claude are these power couple that they covered buildings in fabric. They made floating walkways out of fabric. They did a bridge project covering Central Park in orange flaps that you could walk through. And the thing that they always did was they never charged for their work. Their work was always free. That was their biggest rule. They never sold it. They never charged for it. But they created a practice out of selling sketches, and they made these brilliant books of the project that they charged tens of thousands of dollars for. And they found ways of people who liked the project to give them money, but the project itself was always free. And so from a business perspective, I think that's a brilliant parallel that I hadn't thought about.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for saying that.
Also temporary. There's, the ephemeralness of it'll only be up a certain amount of time. And also from the romantic factor of you two doing work together and those two doing work together. I think they're on my mind because I was at Expo Chicago last month, really exciting big art fair at Navy Pier. And they had a few pieces of their work available for purchase there. And it's incredible seeing some of the small pieces. You forget sometimes which items they made that were saleable and helping them afford to make the work. Because I don't think they had as many corporate sponsors. I think that they sold their work to be able to make.
Right, they didn't get sponsored, from what I understand. And certainly there may be an expert if I'm wrong, but I don't believe they took any sponsorships. I think that was a big part of them feeling like they had the freedom of their work, is that they didn't take sponsorship. And certainly there could be a big company that bought something expensive, but I don't think it was a sponsorship because they didn't want to have to put anyone else's name on it, similar to.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm so glad that was an eye-opening question for you guys. Could be a helpful financial model to look at.
Yes.
You guys just sold a commission or made a commissioned quilt on Instagram today too. So
Yes.
Zach, you've got an eye on the chat. I haven't, but
there are 3 good questions sitting on the stove simmering away. Nicole, Luke, y'all ready?
I'm ready.
Well, Nicole, I guess the first question's for you. Christine would like to know, to what extent are you involved with sewing? In particular, I think she's thinking of the Affirmation Quilt project, but maybe also in general as a person with textile background. So what extent do you sew today?
I don't sew anymore. What I didn't tell you in my presentation, but what I usually include when I have a longer amount of time, is that for 7 years during art school, I started a global clothing company in which I had stores around the country and created this big thing. So I, for a long time, sewed screen printed design fabric, all of that for garments. Now I don't really do any sewing for the affirmation quilts. Sometimes I'll help with the binding because that's Luke's least favorite part. But I'll usually just be doing the hand painting of the fabric ink to create the text. So that's my relationship with sewing right now.
Oh, and the letters are painted on. They're not appliqued fabric.
For now, yeah, they're painted. All the ones you've seen are painted on. I've just got a new long arm that I can digitize the sewing so that it can make clean letters. So the hope is that I can figure out a way that saves us, 40 hours a quilt. Because if, not that there's a problem with sort of putting that time into it, but if we're able to make more quilts, then we can donate more quilts and put more into the world and find these different methods. So that's the hope, is that I can take those 40 to 80 hours from her hand painting each letter.
Question number 2 from Jonathan. How do you mark down your projects so that the future you, talking about versions of ourselves, how do you mark down your projects and record, document your projects so that your future you can come back and look at these projects?
I take a lot of notes in the notes app on my iPhone, a lot, recording. I do sometimes voice recording of just my current self, a lot of just candid photos. I don't have social media at all, so all the photos I take are just for my camera roll, and I love going back to look, just scrolling. Journaling also with dates. Dating your journal entries is big for me. Those are my self-recording techniques.
I do her social media, so she does have an Instagram presence with the project, but that's just because I think it's important for people to be able to find it.
Yeah.
In case that,
Heidi and I agree that it's important for people to be able to find your work. Well, and the notes and the voice recordings might be something that you could one day sell off to fund the projects. You know what I mean?
Publishing a book.
That'd be cool.
I mean, those are your sketches. We were just talking about the sketches of the project.
Yes.
These are your sketches.
Yes. Definitely.
Kenza wants to know, and I have a personal interest in the answer to this question as well, is are you doing any work with teenagers, young people, and mental health?
Yes. So since this project started, I have done a lot of work with schools, creating affirmations in and around schools, for schools. I recently did a lecture series for all the high schools in Kansas City, Missouri.
I mean, every high school, so tens of thousands of students got to see her.
Yeah, so I do a lot of workshops regarding that, a lot, because there's been a lot of interest But that also extends out into prisons and mental health facilities. I try to extend my services and engage with like all types of places that I think need compassion.
She has a couple schools that she sends stacks of the postcards to, so
Yeah.
that it's not like, so she's not sending mail to children or to, you know, or to inmates or to, you know, people's clients. Then they can distribute it from there. But so there's some sort of infrastructure that way too.
I do work with like psychologists and psychiatrists as well, just really trying to get as in with all of that as I can.
That's brilliant. Well, if you ever need to team up with a former educator, there's 2 here.
Yeah.
I won't volunteer Heidi, but I will volunteer myself. If you ever
Yay!
want to
Perfect.
pal up. Mhm.
Amazing.
Nicole, that makes me kind of wonder about, so I also love the self-help book genre. And are there books that have helped you with affirmations or words for manifestation, or like how to approach that? I know for some people, sometimes things like affirmations can be challenging, where you're trying to figure out how to say something that's true, that's not phrased as a future, like you'll always be wanting that, or you'll always be reaching for it, or, you know, you look in the mirror and you say your affirmation, but it feels like a lie. And then how do you make it feel true or right? And so I guess kind of twofold, if there's a book that you have loved that talks about that, or a, you know, doesn't have to be a book, could be a different resource for, especially for people where affirmations are just feeling untrue or like they don't fit. And then also if there's been something for you that's kind of clicked in place that has been a helpful technique for affirmations of feeling connected rather than disconnected.
To answer the first part, the thing that comes to my brain, when I first started reading Brene Brown, like I felt so validated in all of my beliefs about the power of affirmation. I felt so guided in the ways to digest the worthiness of all human beings. And so and she does such a good job of writing in a simplistic way, making it research-based, but like, it's just so accessible. So that would be my answer for that one. I also
particular Brene book
special
or
I like am so bad remembering titles, but like the one that's like the really popular one is
the imperfection one. Is it The Gifts of Imperfection?
No, is it, what is it?
Daring Greatly?
That one, Daring Greatly.
I love Daring Greatly.
It's her bestseller, I think. And then also she has another one about how to overcome hard times. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a very skinny one. Those 2 are the ones that really impacted me. I just got an amazing daily reading book by an author called Nepo. And it's like kind of like just a reading every morning, and they're very affirmation based, and you know, all of that goodness. So I would say like that's my answer to the first part. And what was the second part of the question?
I guess just, you know, finding that balance of an affirmation feeling true versus feeling like a lie, or how do you find an affirmation that fits, especially if there's someone who's maybe struggling to connect with an affirmation, if there's advice for a way in, for understanding or feeling like they're true.
Honestly, I would say like just my entry point into all of this was just like what I said in the presentation. And I hate to repeat it again, but like, it's just my true answer. I just sat down and I wrote down everything that I wish somebody would say to me to make me feel better. And like, sometimes it was like, kind of like, it just felt odd or kind of just like very unique, but that was what I needed to hear. And so I think I understand, like sometimes affirmations are just like, I read them sometimes in other places and I'm like, oh, I don't connect with that. But that practice of literally taking on this kind of role of just like, I'm going to write down I'm going to pretend like the person writing down on this page is someone else soothing me. Just about these very specific things that only I need soothed. And then you can, like edit them into more mantra, or, like something that's more a statement. That would be my best advice. And that's still what I do to this day. So
I think that's beautiful advice. I like that a lot. I think, especially in regard to negative self-talk, I think when I've heard people talk about the idea that you can be beating yourself up in your own head in a way that you would never verbalize to anyone else. And that if you start to create a boundary that says, I will not treat myself in a way that is less than how I would treat someone else, is a really powerful starting point. I also know for me, that's been like part of how I've been, part of how I enjoy my relationship with social media is I look and I think, what do I love seeing in my social media feed? Like what lights me up and makes me excited to follow someone? And then I think, well, then I will try to do more of the type of thing that I like to see in my feed. And so it's obviously a very different setting, but it's that idea of flipping the script of what resonates with me, what do I want to hear? And then I'll put that back out in the world.
Yeah, I think it's a great practice, just connecting with what you actually need / want, like to hear, to consume, just building self-awareness in that way. Then you can create and curate every component of your life to just be what you need or want, which is like an awesome thing.
Yeah.
And don't wait on somebody else to tell you what you feel like you need to hear.
Right. Amen.
Yeah.
I sat down one time and wrote myself a letter. It was, handful of years ago when I was just still very much like I was still in the classroom, but very much kind of wandering. And when I thought about the future, I wasn't quite clear what it would look like. And I wrote myself a letter. And that letter for me became prophetic because it turned out as kind of an activity and kind of free association of sorts, but I wrote what I needed to hear. And it gave me a roadmap, which is what your work is doing for so many people. Yeah.
We have a couple of new things in the chat. Nicole has said, oh, I love this. What about selling a book of your affirmation postcards that you can rip out and send to a friend, or a line of greeting cards? That would be awesome. And that I recently shared on Instagram that you've already done a Hallmark collaboration.
Yes. I did do a Hallmark collab. I always forget about that. I did a Hallmark collab. It's sold still to this day in drugstores around the world. I am working on an affirmation calendar, like a one a day, the old school tear off.
A one a day.
A one a day, old school. So that's something I'm working on. And also I should add, all of my postcards are for sale for $1 on my website. And that's something I just created, I think, a few weeks ago. And I am absolutely interested in all of those suggestions from that comment. Always thinking about what things people would want, like, because I would love to create ways for people to engage in the ways that they want as well. I think that's really invaluable feedback. So thank you, commenter.
A fellow Nicole.
A fellow Nicole.
And then Mickey gave us a list of titles, which makes me, let's just say that in the follow-up email, it'll come out within 24 hours of this recording. We'll make sure to have the list of the 2 Brene Brown titles that you like, Nicole, and Mark Nepo's book that you recommended. So you'll get links to those.
And we'll be putting the recording on YouTube, and the YouTube comments would be another beautiful place to share suggestions and thoughts around books that people have liked, or links for other good things. So can keep the conversation going there too.
Yes.
Well, unless folks got other things to say, I'm going to say thank you very much to each and every one of y'all for being here, sticking with us. I mean, almost everybody but one person was able to stick around for the full time. And I think that's and the testimony, Nicole, to the work that you're doing and the work that you're doing with Nicole, with Luke, and these quilts that you're working on. So thank you for joining us tonight. And we'll see you next month. Luke, are we ready to announce who's going to be next month, or are we going to hold off on that?
We can. I mean, yeah, he's given us the go ahead. It's Joe Cunningham who's coming to next month. So heavy hitter and a good friend.
All right. So we'll see you next month. Thank y'all for being here.
Beautiful.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.